Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we journey into the darkness where the sea itself remembers. A forgotten hotel, a mysterious letter, and a song that counts the breaths of the living. This is not just a story, it is a descent into the echoes of the tide, a hymn that refuses to be silenced. So dim the lights, close your doors, and prepare yourself. For once you hear the Harbour's hymn, you will never listen to silence the same way again. The tide that remembers. The letter had no name, no stamp, and no reason to exist. I found it wedged beneath my apartment door the night the wind came howling off the bay. The kind of wind that turns a city into a chorus of shutters and loose signs. The envelope was salt-stained and soft, its flap stuck down not by glue, but by damp. My name wasn't on it. No name was. Maybe that's why I picked it up. Things without names make you wonder who might claim them. I told myself I'd drop it at the front desk in the morning. I told myself not to get curious. Then I carried it to my desk, sliced the top with a butter knife, and pulled out one page. The handwriting had a slant like a ship listing to one side. Jonah, do you remember the sound between the waves? Not the water what sits inside it. They called it music once. I call it proof. If you still have the recorder, bring it to the Pearl Hotel on low tide night. Room 615. After midnight, don't be late. The tide keeps. Amy, I read it twice, then a third time, because the letter used my old life like a night recorder. The Pearl Hoteliant. The cut it made had edges I knew too well. I hadn't been Jonah to anyone but legal documents for years. Everyone else called me Jack. Jonah belonged to my doctoral program. 2 evenings crouched on slick rocks with a field recorder pressed to my chest, to the night that made me stop listening to water and start avoiding it. The Pearl Hotel was a sea-rotted shell 6 blocks down the waterfront, a place the city kept threatening to demolish and never did. And low tide night meant the moon would empty the bay, past the ruins of the old breakwater, exposing things usually hidden. The tracks of crabs, the iron bones of a drowned pier. And if you believed this story's the mouth of something that breathed through this city's drains. I turned the paper over. No return address. No marks but a faint crescent of coffee. It smelled like salt and printer ink and wrong decisions. I told myself it was a prank, a coincidence. Then I went to my hall closet, where a cardboard box sat like a sealed memory, and cut the tape. Under a stack of notebooks was the battered recorder I hadn't touched in a decade. A handheld unit dinged at the corners, its windscreen still gritty with sand if you rubbed it. I thumbed the power switch. It hesitated like an old man rising from a chair, then lit a pale green. The battery gauge blinked half full as if it had fed on something in the dark. I pressed play. Static hissed. A soft, oceanic hush that rose and fell as if something on the tape were breathing, then a basabalatone, low and rounded, that sagged into sub-bass. So deep I felt it more than heard it. I stopped the tape before memory could catch up. My window rattled in its frame. The wind was waking the harbor. I should have put the letter back in the envelope, folded it into a faultless rectangle of regret, and left it for a mistake to find its way home. Instead, at 11:37 p.m. I put on my coat, slid the recorder into my pocket, and went out. The streets that led to the waterfront were a throat of brick and shadow. The Pearl's sign pearl in pale pink cursive still clung to the hotel's side, the P hanging by a bolt like a letter trying to fall and failing. 16 stories of windows stared out blind. The lobby doors were chained but croaked open if you shouldered them. The city had tried boarding them 2 years ago, and the boards had become splinters in a week. Buildings die slow. Then, all at once, the Pearl was stuck somewhere in the slow. Inside, the air was the color of old water. Chandeliers dangled like a necklace someone decided not to finish. The carpet had a swamp's patience. My footsteps made a spongy shea that felt too close to the noise between waves to ignore. Room 615. The elevator's brass cage was a rusted rib cage without a heart. I took the stairs. On each landing, someone had spray painted a number, then crossed it out, then painted another. I counted by smell the salt sharpened as I climbed, as if floor 6 was closer to the sea than the lobby. At the 6th floor, the hallway was mouthed with too many teeth. Doors lined both sides, gold numbers gone green. 601, 603, 607. I kept walking, counting odd numbers like a rosary, until 615 stared back at me. The door was open a fraction, and every fraction in abandoned places feels deliberate. "Hello?" I said, because movies never teach you to stop. The room was lit by a slice of moon through a tear in the curtains. Dust turned the light into a visible thing on the bed. A dry tide line of salt. On the dresser, a coffee mug with a lipstick print and this circle of damp around it. That hidden tea. Dried on the floor, a suitcase with stickers from places I never visited, Yokohama Nuke, and a place with letters like waves. The bathroom door was shut. The mirror above the dresser carried that thin film of neglect that makes faces look haunted before the haunting starts. The recorder throbbed in my pocket like a heartbeat not my own. "Jonah," said a voice behind me. Not close like it came through the wall. "Is that you?" I turned too fast and knocked the mug with my elbow. It tumbled, hit the rug, and rolled in a slow circle as if considering which direction to be broken in. "Who's there?" I said. I meant, "Why do you know that name?" "I told you not to be late," the voice said. "The tide keeps count," I swallowed. Silence. Then the bathroom door creaked, inch by inch, opening into a dark that smelled like seaweed left too long in the sun. A shape filled the doorway. A woman in a raincoat too thin for a night like this. Hair damped, eyes lit with the kind of focus that makes you wish you were a different person. Her hands were in her pockets like she was holding herself up from the inside. "You look older," she said. "That happens," I answered, because I'd forgotten how to meet a ghost. And if she wasn't a ghost, she was something or someone from the version of me that waited for low tides and held microphones over black water. "You brought it." I lifted the recorder. She flinched when the green light hit her coat. "You shouldn't keep it turned on," she said. It learns. What does? I asked. Emma. Who? Maris, she said, we met 2 lifetimes ago on a pier that no longer exists. You ran from the water. I didn't. The name hit a shelf in my mind I'd bored it over. Maris. Always on the edge of something dropouts. Cliffs. Weather. Collecting songs you could only hear if you pressed your ear to the backs of shells. Sheedy sent me a file once, the first time I heard the tone that wasn't wind or wave or engine. We'd fought about ethical listening, about whether recording is theft or proof. Then came the night on the breakwater. The scream I will not describe. The heavy splash, the water whistling through the gaps like a flute too large to hold. I'd left the city the next day. I came back this fall because my rent got cheaper and my excuses ran out. You disappeared, I said, my mouth remembering the shape of accusation. So did you, she said softly, but I learned things while I was gone, Jonah. I learned how to open the part of the tide that remembers. I don't speak in riddles anymore, I said, because even now it was easier to be cruel than to listen. She stepped into the room and the smell followed her, the clean rot of low tide. She nodded at the window. Come, look. The wind had hushed. When I pulled the curtain aside, the bay lay peeled back from the shore like a secret. The moon had dragged the water past the broken line of the old breakwater, revealing the slick mud ribs of the city's underbody. The pearl's reflection didn't reach the tide line. Between the hotel and the water, a bruise of concrete had emerged, the foundation of a vanished pier. On it stood a figure, too still to be human unless they were braced against the cold like a statue. On either side of the figure, dark mouths opened where storm drains met the bay's throat. Do you see him? Maris asked. Him who? The counter, she said. The one who keeps the number of breaths the bay is owed. He only appears on low tide nights. Some call him a myth. He hates that. The figure lifted one arm. The air seemed to ring, like a glass sung by a wet finger. Then the sound slid lower. A note that wasn't. A note not to human ears. Not at first. My recorder buzzed in my pocket. The green light pulsed. Maris put her hand on my wrist and I didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold like stones that never see sun. "Turn it off," she whispered. I turned it off. The ringing faded. When I blinked hard like a swimmer resurfacing, the figure on the concrete wasn't there. The drains were just mouths again, not throats. I exhaled. The air steamed the glass. "This isn't a prank," I said. It felt foolish to name it. "No," she said. "And it isn't just a legend. The bay remembers everything. We give it names, mistakes, song. It wants the songs back." "You dragged me into an abandoned hotel at midnight to talk about music." I tried a smile that didn't happen. "What do you want from me, Maris?" "Not talk." She reached into her coat and pulled out a sealed Ziploc bag, fogged from cold. Inside lay a cassette tape with a handwritten label. "Room 600, 12:13 a.m. Low tide. I want you to hear what I heard last time, and I want you to help me catch it." "Catch what? The echo that isn't ours?" I tried to laugh and found the part of me that could have been left on the stairs. "You always believed sound was an event," she said, eyes bright as the tooth of a wave. "But here, sound is a place. That note between the waves people in this city call it the Harbour's hymn. The elders call it the breath holder. Fishermen hum it to come see. Divers say if you hum it wrong, the water hums you back. I recorded it 3 months ago. Then 3 nights later, my brother went missing under the bridge." Her voice didn't break when she said, "That frightened me more than the drains." "What does your tape have to do with?" "He went missing at low tide," she said. "He was a swimmer with lungs like a bellows. He knew these waters like a religion. He also knew to stay off the stones when the hymn rises. But that night the note came from Len. He followed it. He told me he would record proof that it had moved into the city. He never came home. Outside, the wind changed. The bay shivered. A gull called once, as if to say a name and fail at the last letter. I came back," I said slowly, "because I wanted to not hear this anymore. And I brought you back," she said, "because the recorder that captured the first good copy belongs to you." I touched my pocket like a superstition. "You think the bee wants the song back?" I said. "You think it's collected?" She tipped her head. "Count with me." "What?" "The waves," she said. "Most nights, they break in uneven numbers along the shore. Tonight they're breaking in 3s. They've done that every low tide night for a month. 3? Gone free? Diver. A dockhand. A boy who took his dog to the tide pools when he shouldn't have. The counter stands there when the tide empties and lifts his arm once for each missing breath. He lifted it 3 times just now. I tried not to imagine a father kneeling at the bay's edge, shouting a name into water, a dog circling a leash on a pier, a tape recorder blinking under black. "You think I can help?" I said, and I wished I didn't sound like a question. "I know you can," she said, "because the last time this city heard the hymn this strong was the winter the Pearl closed. 16 floors evacuated. 121 guests, 3 staff. No deaths recorded, but people left talking about the sound that ran through the plumbing like a flute. You wrote your thesis proposal that winter. You had a section on underwater resonance, whose math I still don't understand. You were going to model the bay as a living instrument. Then you stopped. You could begin again. Her ice mercy. Those ice made certainty look like a disease. And if I say no? I asked. She glanced at the window. Then you pretend you don't. Hear it? When the drains begin humming on your street? I closed my eyes. The room's damp pressed its cool mouth to my skin. Something in the walls clicked. Old pipes, contracting like a spine. When I said now. She checked her watch, a dive watch. It's bezel scarred. Low tide turns in 42 minutes. We need to be under the bridge before the counter lifts his arm again. Bring your recorder. Bring the tape. Bring a piece of yourself you won't want back. I almost asked what that meant. Then I realized I already knew. We left room 615 as the moon leaned a little further west. On the landing, the spray-painted numbers looked wetter than paint. The stairwell smelled like the inside of a shell, salty, faintly sweet, something like copper if you breathed too hard. As we descended, voices rose through the building. Not human voices. The small, articulate noises buildings make when they're deciding whether to stay standing. It sounded like someone humming into a glass bottle in a far room. At the lobby, Maris paused to press her palm against a marble pillar. Her fingers came away wet. Is the tide coming in? I asked. Not yet, she said. Then, listen. I did. The city had 1,000 sounds. A bus coughing at a stoplight, a late couple's laughter slicing the street, a sign's chain complaining about physics, but beneath them, beneath everything goes a single tone, faint enough to be imagined if you were a rational person, and I was trying to be one for once, low as sleep, broad as fog. It wasn't steady, it pulsed like a tide chart. That's it, I said. That's it, she said. It will get louder near the bridge, and it will change once we pass the point where the bay remembers. We pushed through the chained doors. The street outside was a map of glints where broken glass caught moonlight. The Pearl's sign buzzed once as if waking, then died. The wind had dialed down to a cough. My breath made ghosts. The recorder in my pocket vibrated against my thigh with the lightest tick, like a cricket leaning toward a song. We walked south along the sea wall, the hotel shrinking behind us into a darker shadow among other shadows. The tide line lay out like a confession. the bay's floor glistening with stones and the long ribbon backs of kelp. At the end of the old breakwater, a Huron watched us pass with the forensic interest of a bystander who knows where the body is. Maris's steps were sure. Mine tried and failed to be. Each time we passed a storm drain, the hum in the air climbed half a step as if following stairs no one else could see. You said the sound moved into the city, I said when the silence got heavy. How does a bay learn to sing through concrete? The same way a violin learns to sing through spruce, she answered without looking at me. It finds a body and uses it. And whose body is this? Ours, she said. The cities, the pearls, the rooms that know what the sea says when it's alone. We reached the foot of the bridge. A big-shouldered piece of steel painted a tired blue, flecked white where gulls had written their names in guano calligraphy. Below, the water had thinned to a dark river pointing toward the ocean. On the pilings, barnacles clenched like teeth. On the concrete abutment, a mark tracked the tides. Thick myths of salt where the bay licked and retreated. Here, Maris said, leading me down a narrow flight of steps cut into the rock. The steps were slick, the rails cold and gritty. We ducked under the bridge into a cathedral of steel. The hum swelled. The recorder buzzed. My molars ached as if tuned. Maris knelt and took the cassette from her bag. She passed it to me like a ring. I thought you wanted me to record, I said. I do, she said. But first you need to hear what you're chasing. I slotted the tape into the recorder. The mechanism's clicks sounded too loud under the bridge. I put on my headphones. The hiss of tape was a comfort. I hadn't expected the small ocean inside every cassette. Then came the sound Maris had captured. At first, it was only the reef of urban noise, distant traffic, gulls. The rumble of something heavy turning somewhere you couldn't see. Then the note rose, smooth as breath, and spread until it filled the tape like water fills a room. It wasn't a single pitch, but a stack, a chord built from notes not on any scale I knew. I felt it in the forgiving cartilage of my ears. In the soft place at the base of the skull, where the body keeps secrets, and threaded through it, faint but there. Something like articulation pauses spaced not by rhythm but by intention, as if the hum were counting. 1, 2, 3. I pulled the headphones off. The bridge hummed in sympathy. Maris watched my face with clinical tenderness. Do you hear it now? She asked. What is it saying? I asked back. She tilted her head. It doesn't have a mouth we can translate, but it has a number it won't forget. When the count finishes, it takes a breath. Whose breath? She turned toward the water. I followed her gaze. Out where the tide curved, something surfaced, no, not surfaced, suggested itself. A shape made of the absence of light. A convex in the dark where the moon's stripe broke. The hum climbed half a step. The recorder trembled so hard I had to hold it with 2 hands. 3? Maris said softly. It's ode 3. The shadow moved. I realized I'd leaned forward. The toe of my shoe touched the wet line where the bay had been. The taste in my mouth was coin. I heard, far behind us, the city's drains open their throats. 100 round mouths taking air. The hum rushed into them like wind into flutes, Maris said, and put her hand on my chest. Her palm was steady. Mine wasn't. The shadow held for one count more, then thinned into nothing. The hum slid down until the bridge stopped singing. "We have 40 minutes before the tide turns," she said. "That's when it's hungriest and loudest. We'll set up microphones at the mouths of the 3 largest drains. If it climbs the pipes, we capture it. If it speaks in a way machines can't hold, we listen with what's left of us. Either way, we find its shape. If we find its shape, we can interrupt it." "Like breaking a note with a new note," I said, "because this, at last, belonged to the math I once loved." "Exactly," she said. "A counter. Him. And if we're wrong..." She almost smiled. "Then the tide takes what it's owed." Something clicked in the darkness under the bridge. Not a machine. Not an animal I knew. More like 2 stones striking together in a ceremony that began before people. The recorder's green light pulsed twice, then held. My headphones, which hung around my neck, vibrated against my collarbones, as if trying to crawl inside. Jonah Maris whispered. "It's starting again." Above us, the bridge's beams spelled an iron psalm. Beneath us, the bay drew breath. I pressed record. The recorder's red light blinked like an anxious heartbeat. Each time it flashed, I thought of a lung inflating underwater, of a chest that never came up again. Maris crouched on the wet stones beneath the bridge, threading cables with the calm of someone braiding hair. She had 3 small microphones, each sealed in plastic, each clipped to a line of nylon. She anchored them by the mouths of storm drains that sloped toward the bay like open throats. The hum was faint now, a bass whisper, but it pulsed, and I had learned enough about pulse to fear what happens when it skips. "Check the input," she said, and passed me a set of headphones. I slid them on. The left channel hissed, then caught a low resonance like a cello bow sliding across an unfretted string. The right channel was cleaner but carried a wet consonant, like the letter M, being pronounced inside a tunnel. The third line was almost silent, but not entirely. It ticked, a metronome buried in mud. "It's in all of them," I said. "It always is." Maris pulled her coat tighter. "But listen to how the center channel counts." I counted with it. 1. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. And silence, wide as the tide. "Still 3, she said. "That hasn't changed." I wanted to ask what happens when it does, but the words stuck. We waited. The city above us was muffled traffic like distant waves, footsteps like pebbles tumbling. Here, the bridge itself breathed. Steel expands and contracts like a chest. You can hear it if you're quiet enough. I had spent nights as a graduate student measuring those rhythms, thinking them pure mechanics. Now I knew better. Mechanics are only half the story. The other half is hunger. At 12:46, the hum rose. It began as vibration, in the soles of my shoes, then up my bones like a string being tuned through marrow. The microphones caught it first, their levels spiking. The recorder's tape wheels spun faster as if trying to flee. "Don't stop it," Maris warned. "Let it feel." The sound grew. It wasn't a note you could match on a piano. It was the space between notes stretched until it tore. My ears begged to call it music, but my stomach called it something else. Warning, gravity, appetite, and threaded inside. A voice. Not human. Not animal. Something that used the vibration of water and stone the way lungs use air. A voice shaped by the city's drains, it said, elongated, almost delicate. Then, tool, I froze. "It's speaking numbers," I whispered. Maurice's eyes didn't leave the dark water. "It learns from us. That's how it counts." The bridge shuddered. The water below rippled outward, though no wind touched it. And from the farthest drain mouth came a burst, not of water, but of air, cold, rushing, like a sigh too long withheld. The microphone screamed. "Hold it steady," Maris shouted. "Don't let the levels clip." I adjusted knobs with shaking fingers. The sound on the tape wasn't just hum anymore. It had articulation, rhythm. The pulse was no longer 3. It was 4. I looked at Maris. Her face was pale enough to borrow light from the moon. "It changed," I said. Her hand gripped the railing so hard her knuckles whitened. Another breath gone. Somewhere above, a siren wailed, a different kind of counting. By 1:10, the tide had turned. The bay began to crawl back toward the shore, filling the dark channels it had abandoned. The drains exhaled one last time, then fell silent. The hum dwindled. Not gone, but waiting. I stopped the recorder. My hand left sweat on the plastic. "That's proof," I said hoarsely. "Clear signal, articulated, count. If we run spectral analysis, it won't matter," Maris cut in. "Proof never saved anyone. Proof just convinces the ones who come after." I stared at her. "Then why ask me here? Why wreck it at all?" She looked past me, toward the city, "Because I don't want there to be an after." We climbed back to the street. The wind had risen, carrying the sour bite of algae. Lights blinked across the bay. Somewhere, a gull screamed. "Where did your brother disappear?" I asked. She nodded southward. past the ferry docks. There's a drain there larger than the rest. Locals call it the throat. He went looking for the hymn near it. His last message to me was a file. She pulled out her phone, cracked screen glowing. She played the recording. At first, gulls, footsteps on gravel. Then the hum, louder than ours had been, almost jubilant. Her brother's voice. Maris, it's not in the bay anymore. It's... And then... A splash. Abrupt. Final. The file ended. You think it took him? I asked quietly. I know it did. She pocketed the phone, and it's still counting. We parted near the Pearl. She told me to take the recorder, study the signal, prepare a counter frequency. If it's music, it can be broken by music, she said. Find its dissonance. I walked home with the tape heavy as guilt in my pocket. The streets were emptier than before. Too empty. Trains gurgled as I passed, though no rain had fallen. Once I thought I heard my name. Jonah whispered through a grate. I didn't look. At my apartment, I set the recorder on my desk. Its light was off, but in the silence of the room I heard it. Faint, patient, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, and waiting for the next. I didn't sleep. How do you sleep when silence itself has learned to count? The recorder sat on my desk like an animal that had eaten too much. Each time I looked at it, I half expected the green light to flare on its own. My laptop screen was filled with spectrograms-colored shapes, mapping the hum we'd captured under the bridge. Lines ran across the display like veins, thickening at every count. I zoomed in until pixels blurred. The shape wasn't random. It looked like a spiral curling inward. A whirlpool of sound. By dawn, I'd overlaid the spiral with equations from my abandoned thesis. Resonance maps, frequency interference, the mathematics of echo. I saw it then. The hymn wasn't a single frequency. It was a braid 3 voices weaving into one. When the count rose to 4, a 4th strand had appeared, imperfect but strong. If it kept growing, my email chimed. A message with no address, just 3 words. Maris met me at sundown by the ferry docks. Her face was drawn, sleepless like mine. She carried a duffel bag that clinked when she moved. You studied the signal, she asked. I nodded. It's harmonic braiding. If we introduce interference at the right moment, we can fracture the pattern. Stop the count. Her mouth twitched into something like hope. Then we go to the throat. The throat was no metaphor. It was a drain, the size of a tunnel mouth, set in concrete older than either of us. Rust streaked down its rim. The grate was gone, torn away in some forgotten storm. When the tide was high, the throat vomited seawater back into the bay with a roar like a Now, at low tide, it breathed air slow. Cavernous inhale, the hum was already there, vibrating the stone, louder than under the bridge, more deliberate. We set up microphones, we anchored tripods, we ran cables into Maris's laptop, jury-rigged. With audio software, I clipped headphones over my ears and adjusted levels. Tonight, it's at 4, I said. If it climbs to 5, we trigger the countertone. And if 5 means someone's breath is taken, Maris asked. I had no answer. At 12:03, the first wave came. Not water sound. It poured from the throat, thick as fog. My spectrogram spiked into red. The hum rose into its braid. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pause was longer this time, stretched like lungs holding. I prayed it would stop. Then the microphone screamed. The throat exhaled a gust of cold so strong it shoved me back. The air smelled of rust and seaweed and something deeper, something that had never seen light. Maurice's laptop flashed with warnings. "It's taken another," she shouted. I hit the console. The countertone roared through the speakers. A jagged, discordant chord I'd built from the hymn's own spine. Sound, fighting sound. Wave against wave. The throat convulsed. The hum staggered, split, then doubled down. Through the headphones, I heard something else faint, submerged. A voice. Maurice. She froze. "That's him. That's my brother." The voice rose again, tangled in the hum, pleading, calling, not entirely alive. Maris ripped off her headphones and stepped toward the throat. "No!" I grabbed her arm. "It's using him. That's not..." She shook me off. "If he's in there, I have to." The ground beneath us shook. Water surged inside the drain, climbing as if dragged by unseen hands. From the black throat of the tunnel, shapes writhed arms. No. Currents. Currents that moved like limbs. The hum hit 6. I slammed the countertone to maximum. The speakers cracked, their cones trembling. The hymn faltered, fractured, its spiral warping on my screen. The shapes inside the throat recoiled. The water hissed against concrete like an animal denied. Maris screamed not in fear, but in defiance. She hurled the duffel bag into the drain. Metal clanged. From within came an explosion of sound, not just my countertone, but hers. She had packed the bag with portable speakers, preloaded with dissonance. The tunnel howled. The hum shattered into shards, each note tearing at the others. The spiral collapsed. For a heartbeat silence. Then the bay exhaled. A blast of water shot from the throat, drenching us. My laptop skittered across the stones. The microphones bent, snapped. The air rang with an aftertone, high and fading, like a glass cooling after a strike. When it cleared, the hum was gone. We stood soaked, shaking, staring at the tunnel mouth. Nothing stirred inside. No voices. No counting. "Is it over?" I whispered. Maris fell to her knees. Her eyes glistened with salt water and something else. "He's not coming back," she said. The words were knives, but steady ones. She had known. I looked at the recorder still clutched in my hand. Its green light was off. The tape inside was full. "Proof," she'd said, "never saves anyone, but maybe it saves the next." By dawn, the bay was calm. Too calm. No hum beneath the gulls. No resonance in the drain. Just water and wind and the city waking. Maris left without goodbye. Perhaps she returned to her ghosts. Perhaps she followed them. I never saw her again. I went home and passed. The city had offered me silence once before, and I had fled. Now it offered me silence again, and I knew better than to trust it. Before I left, I mailed the tape to a colleague in another city, sealed with one sentence. "If it counts again, break the spiral." That night, in a motel inland, I dreamed of water, not waves, not tides, just stillness. A bay that held its breath, waiting, and in the silence, faint as memory, one. The end. And so, the tide keeps its secrets. But for how long? The counter waits, and the bay remembers every breath it is old. Perhaps tonight, when the drains hum on your street, you'll wonder if it has started counting again. Thank you for joining me on this haunting journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales that blur the line between the known and the unspeakable. Until next time, keep listening, but be careful what you hear.